The gunshot echoed through the valley as Willow McCreary steadied her trembling hand, the revolver still warm against her palm. She had warned Earl Blackburn not to follow her when she finally found the courage to leave, but men like him didn't listen to women like her. Now he lay writhing in the dust outside her small cabin, clutching his thigh and hurling curses that scattered the birds from nearby trees. "You'll regret this, Willow," Earl spat, his face contorted with rage. "No woman leaves Earl Blackburn, nobody." Willow's voice didn't waver as she responded, "I should have left years ago, Earl. Consider yourself lucky I aimed for your leg." The year was 1878, and in Colorado territory, a woman leaving her man was almost unheard of. But after 5 years of Earl's drinking, gambling, and bruised knuckles leaving their mark on her skin, Willow had finally gathered enough courage and enough savings to strike out on her own. She watched from the doorway as Earl's friends helped him onto his horse. The group of men cast menacing glances her way before disappearing down the trail that led to town. Willow knew this wasn't over. In a place like Timber Creek, a woman alone was vulnerable, but she'd rather face whatever came than spend another night under Earl's roof. The small cabin she'd purchased sat on the edge of a meadow, backing up to the foothills. It wasn't much, just one room with a stone fireplace, but it was hers. Paid for with money she'd secretly saved from selling her needlework and preserves over the years. The previous owner, an old trapper heading north to Montana, had been happy to accept her cash without asking questions. As darkness fell that evening, Willow sat by her fire, attempting to calm her nerves by mending a torn shirt. Every snap of a twig outside sent her heart racing. She kept her father's old shotgun propped against the wall beside her chair. 3 days passed without incident. Willow began to hope that perhaps Earl had decided to let her be. She spent her days tidying the cabin, tending to the small garden plot, and making plans for improvements come spring. She would need to add a lean-to for firewood storage before winter, and perhaps even build a small chicken coop. On the 4th night, she was awakened by the sound of horses approaching. Many horses. She leapt from her bed and grabbed her shotgun, peering through the window. In the pale moonlight, she could make out at least 6 riders. Earl was at the front, his leg clearly still troubling him as he dismounted awkwardly. "Come on out, Willow," he called, his words slurred. "Time to come home where you belong." Willow's throat tightened with fear, but she managed to call back, "I am home, Earl. Now ride away before someone gets hurt." The men laughed, passing a bottle between them. Willow recognized them all, Earl's drinking companions from the Silver Dollar Saloon. None were men of good character. "Last chance, Willow," Earl shouted. "Come out now or we'll come in and get you." When she made no move to comply, Earl nodded to one of his companions. "Burn it." Willow watched in horror as 2 men approached with lit torches. She fired a warning shot through the window, causing them to momentarily scatter, but they quickly regrouped. The first torch hit the porch, flames immediately licking up the dry wood. The second landed on the roof. With smoke beginning to fill the cabin, Willow grabbed her shawl and the small pouch containing her remaining money. She had no choice but to flee out the back window, disappearing into the darkness of the pines while Earl and his men whooped and hollered around the blazing cabin. She ran until her lungs burned, then dropped to her knees in a small clearing, watching the orange glow of her burning home light up the night sky through the trees. Tears streamed down her face as she realized everything she had worked for was gone. But she was alive, and as long as she had that, she would find a way forward. As dawn broke, Willow made her way to Widow Jensen's farm. The old woman had always been kind to her, occasionally purchasing Willow's jams and preserves. She would surely offer temporary refuge. Good Lord, child. "What happened to you?" Martha Jensen exclaimed upon finding Willow on her doorstep, covered in soot and scratches from her nighttime flight through the forest. After hearing Willow's story, Martha clicked her tongue disapprovingly. "That Earl Blackburn is a menace. You were right to leave him, though many won't see it that way." She poured Willow a cup of strong coffee. You can stay here as long as you need, but be warned Earl has friends in town. Word will get around. Willow spent 3 days recovering at Martha's farm, helping with chores to earn her keep. On the fourth morning, Sheriff Daniels rode up to the farmhouse. Willow watched from the window as he spoke with Martha in the yard, his expression grave. "He says he needs to speak with you," Martha said when she returned inside. "Says there's been accusations made." Willow stepped onto the porch, chin raised despite her fear. "Sheriff, Miss McCreary." The sheriff removed his hat. "I've got Earl Blackburn in my jail claiming you shot him without provocation. Says you stole money from him too." "That's a lie," Willow said firmly. "The money was mine, earned from my own work, and I shot him because he threatened me when I left." The sheriff studied her face. "Can't say I'm surprised. Earl's been trouble since he was a boy." He replaced his hat. "Still, there's the matter of the law. His pa has influence with Judge Winston." "Are you arresting me?" Willow's heart pounded. "Not today, but I'd advise you to consider moving on. Timber Creek might not be safe for you anymore." With that, he mounted his horse and rode away. Martha squeezed Willow's shoulder. "He's right, dear. You need to get some distance from here." "But where would I go?" Willow asked, despair creeping into her voice. "My sister lives in Promise Valley, about 40 miles west. It's a growing place with the new silver mine. She might be able to help you find work." Martha pressed a folded paper into Willow's hand. "I'll write you a letter of introduction." 2 days later, Willow found herself on the weekly stagecoach heading west, everything she owned wrapped in a small bundle. As Timber Creek disappeared behind her, she felt both relief and trepidation. She was truly on her own now. The journey to Promise Valley took most of a day, winding through mountain passes and along rushing rivers. When they arrived, Willow was struck by the bustling nature of the town. Unlike sleepy Timber Creek, Promise Valley hummed with activity, miners, merchants, and settlers creating a patchwork community that seemed full of possibility. Martha's sister, Harriet Barnes, ran a small boarding house on the edge of town. She was a stern-looking woman with silver-streaked hair pulled back in a tight bun, but her eyes softened when she read her sister's letter. "Any woman with the courage to leave a bad situation is welcome here," she said, showing Willow to a tiny room under the eaves. "I can offer you board in exchange for helping with the cleaning and cooking. If you prove reliable, we can discuss wages later." For 2 weeks, Willow worked from sunrise to sunset, scrubbing floors, changing linens, and preparing meals for the 6 boarders, all men working at the mine. She kept to herself, politely deflecting questions about her past. At night, she would sit by her window, staring at the stars and wondering if she would ever feel truly safe again. On a crisp autumn morning, Willow was hanging laundry in the yard when she heard the sound of hammering from the vacant lot next door. Curious, she peered over the fence to see a tall man methodically measuring lumber. A handsome bay horse grazed nearby, and a wagon loaded with building supplies stood under a tree. The man looked up, seeming to sense her gaze. He was younger than she'd initially thought, probably no more than 30, with sun-browned skin and dark hair that curled slightly where it met the collar of his shirt. His eyes, a startling blue against his tanned face, crinkled at the corners as he nodded in greeting. "Morning," he called, setting down his saw. Willow hesitated before responding. "Good morning. Isaac Porter," he introduced himself with a slight tip of his hat. "Just acquired this piece of land, planning to open a saddle and tack shop once I get the building up." "Willow McCreary," she replied, keeping her distance. "I work at Mrs. Barnes' boarding house." Isaac smiled. "Pleased to meet you, Miss McCreary." Over the next few days, Willow found herself watching Isaac's progress whenever her chores brought her outside. He worked with quiet efficiency, the frame of his shop taking shape rapidly. Unlike the miners and other men in town, he didn't frequent the saloon in the evenings. Instead, he often sat outside his tent playing a harmonica as darkness fell. One evening, Mrs. Barnes mentioned him over dinner. "That Porter fellow seems a decent sort. Came from Kansas, I hear. Has a good reputation as a leather worker." He certainly works hard, Willow observed, trying to sound casual. Mrs. Barnes gave her a knowing look. Just be careful, girl. Men can surprise you and not always pleasantly. Willow nodded, the memory of Earl's rages still fresh in her mind. A week later, Willow was returning from the general store with supplies when she noticed a group of men gathered around Isaac's nearly completed shop. Their postures suggested trouble. Moving closer, she recognized two of them minors who had recently been turned away from the boarding house for being too rowdy. "All I'm saying is we don't need any competition," one man was saying, his finger jabbing at Isaac's chest. "Simmons over on Front Street handles all the tack needs just fine." Isaac stood his ground, hands relaxed at his sides. "There's room enough for both of us. My specialties are different from his." "Maybe we don't want any Kansas boys taking business from local folks," another man chimed in, stepping closer. Willow felt her heart racing. The situation was deteriorating quickly, and Isaac was outnumbered 4-1. Without thinking, she called out, "Mr. Porter, Mrs. Barnes needs to speak with you right away about that special order." All heads turned toward her. Isaac caught on immediately. "Gentlemen, if you'll excuse me, business calls." He stepped away from the men, walking toward Willow with measured steps. The miners grumbled but dispersed, shooting dark looks over their shoulders. "Thank you," Isaac said quietly when he reached her. "Though I could have handled it." 4-1 aren't favorable odds, Mr. Porter," Willow replied, her pulse still quick. Isaac studied her face. "You look familiar somehow. Have we met before today?" Willow shook her head. "I don't believe so. I've only been in Promise Valley a few weeks." "Where were you before?" he asked. "Timber Creek," she answered, then immediately regretted revealing even that small detail. Something flickered in Isaac's eyes. "I passed through there recently." He seemed about to say more, then changed course. "Would you allow me to thank you properly? Perhaps dinner at the hotel restaurant tomorrow?" Willow hesitated. The last thing she needed was entanglements with another man, but something about Isaac's straightforward manner intrigued her. "Just dinner," she finally agreed. "And only because Mrs. Barnes has given me the evening off." Isaac smiled. "I'll call for you at 6. The following evening, Willow found herself seated across from Isaac in the small but respectable dining room of the Promise Valley Hotel. She wore her one good dress, a navy blue wool with white collar that she'd brought from her previous life. Their conversation flowed more easily than she expected. Isaac spoke of growing up on a small farm in Kansas, learning leatherworking from his father, and his decision to head west after his parents passed away within months of each other. "I wanted a fresh start somewhere new," he explained. "Seems we have that in common." Willow tensed. "What makes you say that?" Isaac regarded her steadily. "Most young women don't arrive in mining towns alone unless they're running from something or someone." When Willow remained silent, he continued, "I meant what I said about passing through Timber Creek. It was about 3 weeks ago. There was talk about a woman who'd shot her man and run off after he and his friends burned down her cabin." Willow's face drained of color. "Is that why you invited me to dinner? Curiosity about the scandal?" "No," Isaac said firmly. "I invited you because you showed courage stepping in today when those men were looking for trouble. The same courage I'd wager that it took to leave a bad situation." Willow stared at her plate. "You don't know what happened." "I know enough," Isaac replied gently. "I saw the man you shot, Earl Blackburn. He was drinking heavily at the saloon, showing off his wound and vowing revenge on the woman who'd done him wrong. Even through his boasting, I could tell what kind of man he was." A tear slipped down Willow's cheek before she could stop it. "I'm not safe here either, am I, if you recognized me from those stories?" "Promise Valley is far enough that most folks won't make the connection," Isaac assured her, "and for what it's worth, I believe you were justified." Willow wiped away the tear. "It doesn't matter what you believe. If Earl finds me, he'll make good on his threats." "He won't find you," Isaac said with surprising conviction. "And if he does, he'll have to go through me first." Willow looked up sharply. "Why would you put yourself at risk for someone you barely know?" Isaac considered her question. My mother stayed with my father despite his drinking and his temper. She died never knowing peace. I promised myself I'd never stand by watching history repeat itself." Their eyes met across the table, and Willow felt something shift inside her, a tiny crack in the wall she'd built around her heart. As autumn progressed, Isaac completed his shop and began taking orders for saddles, bridles, and other leather goods. His reputation for quality work spread quickly, and despite the initial hostility from some locals, his business flourished. Willow continued working at the boarding house, but she and Isaac developed a friendship that gradually deepened. They often shared Sunday afternoon walks, and he would sometimes bring her scraps of fine leather from which she crafted small purses and pouches to sell. One evening in late November, Willow was helping Isaac organize his shop when he suddenly asked, "Have you thought about what you'll do when winter comes? That attic room at the boarding house will be freezing." Willow arranged a row of bridles on hooks. "Mrs. Barnes has offered to let me move to a room on the second floor once one of the miners leaves next month." Isaac nodded, then hesitated before continuing. "I've been thinking about building a proper house behind the shop, nothing fancy but solid, a home rather than just rooms." Willow's hands stilled. "That sounds sensible. This town is growing, you'll likely do well here." "I was hoping," Isaac began, then seemed to lose his nerve. "That is, I wondered if you might advise me on the design, a woman's perspective." "Of course," Willow replied, uncertain why the request made her pulse quicken. As December arrived, bringing the first heavy snows, news reached Promise Valley that shattered Willow's growing sense of security. One of the stage drivers mentioned to Mrs. Barnes that a man in Timber Creek had been asking questions about a woman matching Willow's description who might have headed west. He said the man had a limp and a mean look about him. Mrs. Barnes told Willow gravely, "I fear your past may be catching up with you, dear." That night, Willow lay awake, terror coursing through her veins. She had begun to believe she could build a new life here, perhaps even a future with Isaac, whose quiet strength and gentle manner had slowly won her trust. Now, Earl's shadow loomed over her again. The next morning, she found Isaac in his shop and told him everything: the years of abuse, her escape, and now the threat of Earl's approach. "I'll have to move on," she concluded, fighting back tears. "Further west, perhaps, or north to Wyoming territory." Isaac listened without interrupting. When she finished, he took her hands in his. "Willow, running isn't the answer. You'll never be free if you spend your life looking over your shoulder." "What choice do I have?" she asked, her voice breaking. "He won't stop until he finds me." "Stay," Isaac said simply. "Stay and face him, not alone, but with people who care about you at your side." Willow shook her head. "I won't put others in danger." "Do you trust me?" Isaac asked suddenly. The question caught her off guard. "Yes," she admitted, "more than I've trusted anyone in a very long time." "Then give me time to make arrangements. Promise me you won't leave without saying goodbye." After a moment's hesitation, Willow nodded. "I promise." Over the next few days, Willow noticed Isaac in deep conversation with various townspeople: Sheriff Callahan, the blacksmith, even Mrs. Barnes. When she questioned him, he would only say he was ensuring the odds were more favorable this time. A week later, word came that a man matching Earl's description had arrived in a town 30 miles east, still asking questions and moving steadily toward Promise Valley. Willow packed her few possessions, prepared to slip away before he arrived, promise to Isaac or not. She couldn't bear the thought of bringing violence to these people who had shown her kindness. As she crept down the boarding house stairs before dawn, she found Isaac waiting in the parlor as if he'd anticipated her attempt to flee. "You promised," he said simply. Willow clutched her bundle. "I can't stay, Isaac. You don't know Earl like I do. He won't stop until he faces consequences for his actions," Isaac finished for her. "Willow, this isn't just about you anymore. Men like Earl Blackburn count on fear keeping their victims isolated, but you're not alone now." "What are you saying?" Isaac stepped closer. "I'm saying that half the town knows what's coming, and they're prepared." Sheriff Callahan has been briefed on Blackburn's crimes. Mrs. Barnes has sworn testimony about the bruises she saw on your arms when you first arrived. Even the minister has spoken against men who abuse their position of authority over women. Willow stared at him in disbelief. You told everyone. I told them only what they needed to know, that a brave woman escaped a dangerous man, and that man is coming here to drag her back or worse. Isaac's eyes held hers. No one thinks you should run, Willow, and no one thinks you were wrong to defend yourself. Why? She whispered. Why would they stand up for a stranger? Because good people recognize injustice when they see it, Isaac replied. And because you're not a stranger anymore. You're one of us now. Tears filled Willow's eyes. The concept of belonging somewhere, of people rallying to protect her, was almost too much to comprehend after years of isolation with Earl. There's something else, Isaac continued, reaching into his pocket. He withdrew a small leather pouch and placed it in her hand. I finished the house plans. Confused, Willow opened the pouch. Inside was a simple drawing of a cabin larger and sturdier than her burned one, with a covered porch and what appeared to be 2 bedrooms. I don't understand, she said. Isaac took a deep breath. I know it's soon, and I know you have every reason to be wary of men and their promises, but I'm asking you to consider a future here with me. Not right away, he added hastily. Take all the time you need. But know that when you're ready, there's a home waiting to be built. Willow's hand trembled as she traced the lines of the drawing. Isaac, the sound of horses outside interrupted her response. Through the window, she could see a group of riders approaching in the gray light of dawn. It's time, Isaac said softly. Stay here, let us handle this. Before she could protest, he was out the door, joining Sheriff Callahan and several other men who had gathered in the street. Willow moved to the window, her heart pounding as she recognized Earl at the head of the group, flanked by 2 of his Timber Creek cronies. We're looking for a woman, Earl called out, his voice carrying clearly in the cold morning air. Willow McCreary, dark hair, green eyes. Ran off from Timber Creek about 2 months back. Sheriff Callahan stepped forward. What business do you have with this woman? Earl shifted in his saddle. She's my wife. Had some kind of breakdown, shot me, then disappeared. I'm concerned for her well-being. Strange way to show concern, Isaac remarked, loud enough for all to hear. Burning down her cabin and threatening her life. Earl's eyes narrowed as he focused on Isaac. Don't know who you are, mister, but this ain't your affair. I beg to differ, Sheriff Callahan interjected. I've received information that Miss McCreary was fleeing abuse and defended herself justifiably. I've also been told she was never legally married to you, Mr. Blackburn. Earl's face darkened with rage. That lying, careful, the sheriff warned. You're addressing a lady who has the support of this community. Willow couldn't believe what she was hearing. From her vantage point, she could see other townspeople emerging from their homes and businesses, forming a solid wall behind Isaac and the sheriff. Men she'd served breakfast to at the boarding house, women she'd sat beside at church, shopkeepers who'd come to know her over the past months, all standing in silent solidarity. Earl seemed to register the shifting odds. His companions looked uneasy, glancing around at the growing crowd. Now, Sheriff Callahan continued, I suggest you gentlemen turn around and head back the way you came. Miss McCreary has made her choice, and it doesn't include you, Blackburn. For a moment, it seemed Earl might challenge the sheriff, his hand twitching near his holster. But something in the steady gazes of the townspeople must have convinced him that this was a fight he couldn't win. This ain't over, he snarled, yanking his horse around. She'll pay for what she did. Isaac stepped forward. It is over. If you return to Promise Valley or attempt to harm Miss McCreary in any way, you'll answer to all of us. Earl spat on the ground before spurring his horse, his companions following close behind. The townspeople remained in place, watching until the riders disappeared around the bend. Willow stood frozen by the window, tears streaming down her face. She hadn't expected this, hadn't dared to hope that she would find not just refuge but true acceptance and protection. Mrs. Barnes appeared beside her, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "There now, dear. It seems you've made quite an impression on our town, especially on a certain leather worker." Willow turned to her. "I don't know what to say." "Well, I suspect there's a young man out there who's hoping you might say yes to his proposal," Mrs. Barnes replied with a small smile. "Though in my opinion, he's rushing things terribly." "It's not that simple," Willow protested. "After Earl, I'm not sure I can trust my judgment when it comes to men." Mrs. Barnes nodded understandingly. "That's fair, but consider this: did Earl ever stand up for you? Did he ever put your needs before his own? Did he build you up rather than tear you down?" When Willow remained silent, she continued, "Just something to think about, dear." Outside, the crowd was dispersing, people returning to their morning routines as if facing down a vengeful man was nothing out of the ordinary. Isaac stood talking with the sheriff, his expression serious until he caught sight of Willow in the doorway. His face softened immediately. Willow stepped onto the porch, still clutching the drawing of the house. Isaac crossed to her, concern in his eyes. "Are you all right?" he asked. "I'm overwhelmed," she admitted. "I never expected anyone to stand up for me like that." "You're worth standing up for," Isaac said simply. Then, glancing at the drawing in her hand, "I meant what I said, Willow. However long it takes, whatever you need to feel secure again, I'll wait." Willow studied his face, the earnest blue eyes, the set of his jaw, the gentle smile that appeared whenever he looked at her. In that moment, she realized something profound. Earl had never once looked at her the way Isaac did now, as if she were precious, strong, and worthy of respect all at once. "I don't need a grand house," she said finally, "but I would like a home, one built on trust and kindness." Isaac's eyes lit with hope. "Is that a yes?" "It's a let's build something together, one day at a time," Willow replied, a tentative smile breaking through her tears. The winter passed with no further sign of Earl Blackburn. Isaac and Willow's courtship progressed slowly, with proper chaperoning by Mrs. Barnes and frequent Sunday outings after church. To the delight of the town gossips, Isaac began construction on his house in March, as soon as the ground thawed enough to dig foundations. True to his word, he built its strong, sturdy oak beams, thick walls and windows positioned to catch both morning and afternoon light. Willow visited the site daily, offering suggestions and sometimes helping with the smaller tasks. It became their shared project, a physical manifestation of the future they were carefully constructing together. By early summer, the house was complete. On a perfect June evening, with wildflowers carpeting the meadows around Promise Valley, Isaac and Willow were married in a simple ceremony in the town's small church. The entire community turned out to celebrate, the same people who had stood against Earl now standing as witnesses to this new beginning. As Isaac carried Willow over the threshold of their new home that night, she felt the last shadows of her past life finally recede. The woman who had fled a burning cabin in the night had found not just shelter, but a true home, one built on the strength of her own courage and the foundations of genuine love. 5 years later, Willow sat on the porch of their expanded house, watching Isaac teaching their 3-year-old son James how to brush their gentle mare. Their 5-year-old daughter, Emma, sat beside Willow, carefully stitching a piece of leather under her mother's guidance. The leather shop had prospered, and they had added a small side business selling Willow's leather goods and preserves. Promise Valley had grown into a proper town, with a school, several churches, and a growing commercial district. Isaac now served on the town council, and Willow had helped establish a women's aid society that offered support to those in difficult circumstances. Occasionally, travelers would bring news from other settlements. Earl Blackburn's name came up once he had been killed in a saloon brawl 2 counties over, having never found the redemption that might have saved him. Willow had felt a complex mixture of relief and sadness at the news. Relief that his shadow would never again darken her door, sadness for the wasted life and the man he might have been with different choices. As twilight descended on their little homestead, Isaac joined her on the porch, the children already tucked into bed after their evening prayers. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, settling beside her on the swing he'd built last summer. Willow leaned against his shoulder. "I was remembering the day we met, how different everything was then." Isaac nodded, his arm drawing her closer. "You were running for your life, and now you're the heart of this community." "We've built something beautiful here," Willow said, gazing out at the land they'd cultivated together, the vegetable garden, the small orchard of apple trees, the flower beds that bordered the path to their door. "Yes, we have," Isaac agreed. "Though I think the most beautiful thing we've built isn't made of wood or stone." Willow smiled, understanding his meaning perfectly. The home they'd created went far beyond the physical structure. It was built of trust restored, of fears faced together, of dreams shared and nurtured through both joyous and difficult days. "Do you ever think about what might have happened if they hadn't burned your cabin that night?" Isaac asked. "If you'd been allowed to stay in Timber Creek?" Willow considered the question. "I might have been safe for a time, but I wouldn't have found my way here to you, to this life we've made." She took his hand, her fingers intertwining with his. "Sometimes what seems like destruction is really just clearing ground for something stronger to be built." Isaac kissed her gently. "Then I'll build you one stronger," he murmured against her lips, echoing the promise he'd made years ago. As stars appeared in the darkening sky, Willow McCreary Porter sat contentedly beside the man who had helped her rebuild not just a home, but a life one far stronger and more beautiful than anything she could have imagined on that terrifying night when she'd watched her first attempt at independence go up in flames. In the quiet of the evening, with the sound of their children's peaceful breathing drifting through the open window, Willow knew with absolute certainty that she had found not just safety, but true belonging. The cabin Earl had burned had been a shelter. What Isaac had helped her build was a sanctuary, one that would stand strong against whatever storms the future might bring.